The bell above the door chimed softly as Beatrice Crowley looked up from her ledger. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Crowley's books, catching dust motes in its golden rays. She smiled at the familiar sound, one she had heard thousands of times over the past 15 years. Each chime brought a customer, a friend, or simply someone seeking refuge among the shelves. "Good morning, Mrs. Crowley," called Martha Henderson, the elementary school teacher, as she stepped inside. She carried a canvas bag over her shoulder and wore her usual cheerful expression. "Good morning, Martha," Beatrice replied, setting down her pen. "Looking for anything specific today?" "Just browsing, thank you. I have a free period this afternoon and thought I might treat myself." Martha wandered toward the fiction section, her fingers trailing along the spines of books as she walked. Beatrice returned to her ledger, but kept one ear tuned to Martha's movements. She had learned over the years that running a bookshop was as much about understanding people as it was about understanding books. Some customers wanted recommendations and conversation. Others needed solitude and space. Martha fell somewhere in between, happy to chat if Beatrice initiated, but equally content to explore alone. The shop itself was a reflection of Beatrice's personality, organized but not rigid, welcoming but not cluttered. 3 large rooms connected by arched doorways housed the collection. The front room held new releases and bestsellers, along with the counter where Beatrice worked. The middle room contained fiction, sorted alphabetically by author. The back room held everything else: nonfiction, children's books, local history, and a small section of used books that people donated or sold. Beatrice had arranged comfortable reading chairs near the windows in each room. A small table in the back held a coffee maker and a jar for donations. The coffee was free, but most people left $1 or $2. She used that money to keep cookies stocked beside the coffee. The walls were painted a warm cream color, and Beatrice had hung artwork by local artists throughout the shop. Landscapes of Briarfield and the surrounding countryside dominated, but there were also a few abstracts and portraits. She rotated the artwork quarterly, giving different artists a chance to display their work. It had become a point of pride for local artists to have their work featured in Crowley's books. At 68, Beatrice moved with the careful grace of someone who understood their body's limitations, but refused to let those limitations define them. Her hair, once a deep brown, had turned mostly silver. She wore it in a simple bob that framed a face marked by laugh lines and crow's feet. Her eyes, a clear gray blue, missed very little. She dressed practically in comfortable slacks and sweaters during the cooler months, cotton blouses and light cardigans in summer. People in Briarfield considered her elegant in an understated way. She never wore excessive jewelry, just a simple watch and small gold earrings. Her hands were always clean and neat, her nails trimmed short. She spoke softly but clearly, with excellent diction that suggested education and refinement. Yet there was nothing pretentious about her. She was simply herself, neither playing up nor playing down who she was. "Mrs. Crowley, have you read this one?" Martha held up a novel by a popular contemporary author. Beatrice rose from her stool and walked over. "I have. It's quite good. The author does an excellent job building suspense without resorting to cheap tricks. The characters feel real, and the setting is vividly drawn." "Is it very violent?" "I don't mind suspense, but I can't handle too much graphic violence." "There are a few intense scenes, but they're not gratuitously violent. The author focuses more on the psychological aspects than the physical." Beatrice paused, then added, "If you want suspense without violence, you might also like this one." She pulled another book from the shelf. The protagonist is an archivist who discovers a historical mystery. Very atmospheric. Martha examined both books, then smiled. "I'll take them both. It's going to be a long winter, and I'll need plenty to read." They walked back to the counter together. Beatrice wrapped the books in brown paper, a touch she insisted on, even though most bookshops had abandoned the practice. There was something satisfying about the ritual of wrapping, about creating a small package that held stories and ideas. "How is school going?" Beatrice asked as she tied string around the package. "Busy, as always. The children are excited about Halloween next week. We're having a costume parade and party." Martha pulled out her wallet. "You should see some of the costumes their parents have made. Very creative." "I'm sure they're wonderful." Beatrice handed over the package. "That'll be $28.50. Martha paid and tucked the package into her bag. "Thank you, Mrs. Crowley." "Say, are you coming to the town council meeting tomorrow night?" Beatrice hesitated. She made it a practice to stay informed about local issues, but she rarely attended meetings in person. "I hadn't planned on it." "What's on the agenda?" "There's a proposal for a new business on Main Street." "Some kind of entertainment venue, I think. The details have been a bit vague, which is unusual. Normally, everyone knows everything about any new business before the first board meeting." Beatrice filed that information away. "I'll try to attend if I can close the shop a bit early." After Martha left, the morning continued in its usual pleasant rhythm. Several more customers came and went. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the bakery 3 doors down, stopped in to browse the cookbook section. She had been doing this every Tuesday for 10 years, always looking but rarely buying. Beatrice didn't mind. The woman clearly enjoyed the ritual, and that was what mattered. Tom Garcia, the teenage son of the local mechanic, came in during his lunch break from the high school. He was saving up for college and had developed a love of science fiction. Beatrice always set aside books she thought he might enjoy. Today, she had a used copy of an Arthur C. Clarke novel. "Mrs. Crowley, you're a lifesaver," Tom said when she showed him the book. "I've been wanting to read this one. It's a classic. I think you'll enjoy it." She charged him only $3 for the used book, knowing his family's finances were tight. "How are your college applications going?" "Good. I should hear back from State University by December. My guidance counselor thinks I have a solid chance at their engineering program." "I'm sure you do." "You're a bright young man, Tom." She meant it. The boy reminded her of students she had known long ago, full of potential and dreams. After Tom left, Beatrice ate her lunch at the counter. A turkey sandwich she had packed that morning, an apple, and a thermos of tea. She allowed herself this 1 hour of peace, reading while she ate. Today's book was a history of the American judicial system. Old habits died hard, and she still found such topics fascinating, even though she had left that world behind. The afternoon brought a lull in customers, which was typical for Tuesday. Beatrice used the time to process new inventory that had arrived earlier in the week. She unpacked boxes, checked titles against her order forms, and entered books into her computer system. She had resisted technology for years, but eventually accepted that a computerized inventory was simply more efficient. She still kept paper records as backup, though. Computers could fail. As she worked, her mind wandered to Martha's mention of the town council meeting. Briarfield was a small town of about 4,000 people, nestled in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. It had been founded in the early 1800s and had survived various economic ups and downs over the centuries. The town center consisted of Main Street with its historic buildings, most of which now housed shops and restaurants. The residential areas spread out from there in a neat grid pattern. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where 3 generations of a family might attend the same church, where the annual 4th of July parade was the social event of the year. When Beatrice had first arrived 15 years ago, she had been overwhelmed by how different it was from the places she had lived before. But she had grown to love the slower pace, the sense of community, the way people looked out for one another. Of course, Small towns had their drawbacks too. Privacy was nearly impossible. Gossip spread faster than wildfire, and change, when it came, often met resistance. But overall, Beatrice had found what she was looking for here: peace. The bell chimed again, and she looked up to see Walter Simmons entering. Walter was in his 70s, a retired history professor who had moved to Briarfield about 5 years ago. He and Beatrice had struck up a friendship based on their mutual love of books and knowledge. They often discussed historical events and debated various interpretations of history. "Beatrice," he greeted her with a warm smile. "How are you this fine afternoon?" "Very well, Walter." "And you?" "Can't complain." "My arthritis is manageable today, which is always a blessing." He made his way to the history section, moving slowly but steadily with his cane. "I'm hoping you have something new for me. I finished that biography you recommended last week." "I do, actually." Beatrice joined him in the history section and pulled a book from the shelf. "This just came in. It's about the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. The author uses primary sources extensively and challenges some conventional wisdom." Walter's eyes lit up. "Excellent. I do enjoy when historians question the established narrative." He flipped through the pages, scanning the table of contents and introduction. "Yes, this looks perfect. I'll take it." They returned to the counter, and as Beatrice wrapped his purchase, Walter said, "I suppose you've heard about this mysterious new business proposal?" "Martha mentioned it this morning. She said the details have been vague." "Very vague. I find that suspicious. Usually, when someone wants to open a business in Briarfield, they're eager to share their plans, to get the community excited. This group has been remarkably secretive." "What kind of entertainment venue is it supposed to be?" Walter shrugged. "That's just it. Nobody seems to know exactly. The application to the town council describes it as a recreational facility for adults. That could mean anything from a pool hall to a nightclub. The company behind it is called Riverside Ventures, LLC. I tried looking them up online, but their website is just a single page with no real information." Beatrice frowned. Her instincts, honed over decades of legal work, prickled with warning. "That does seem odd." "I'm planning to attend the meeting tomorrow night." "Perhaps you should come too. We could use voices of reason if things get contentious." "I'll be there," Beatrice decided. Something about this situation felt wrong, and she had learned long ago to trust her instincts. After Walter left, Beatrice found herself unable to focus on her inventory work. Instead, she turned to her computer and searched for Riverside Ventures, LLC. Walter was right. Their website was essentially blank. She tried searching for business registrations and found that the company had been registered in Delaware just 6 months ago. The registered agent was a law firm that specialized in corporate services, which told her nothing about who actually owned or operated the business. She broadened her search, looking for any news articles or business filings that might mention Riverside Ventures. She found nothing. It was as if the company existed on paper, but had no actual presence or history. For most people, this might not have seemed particularly alarming. For Beatrice, it set off alarm bells. In her years as a JAG officer, she had learned that legitimate businesses were usually transparent about their operations. When companies hid behind layers of legal entities and provided minimal information, they often had something to hide. But she cautioned herself against jumping to conclusions. Perhaps this was simply a small company that hadn't established much of an online presence yet. Perhaps the owners valued their privacy. There could be perfectly innocent explanations. Still, she would attend that town council meeting tomorrow, and she would pay very close attention. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. A few more customers came in, including several tourists who were passing through town. Beatrice recommended local history books to them and suggested restaurants for dinner. She took pride in being a resource for visitors, helping them discover the charms of Briarfield. At 6 o'clock, she closed the shop. She turned the sign on the door, locked up, and walked the 3 blocks to her house. It was a small Victorian cottage painted pale yellow with white trim. The house had a wraparound porch where she liked to sit in warmer weather. The yard was modest but well-maintained, with flower beds that bloomed from spring through fall. Inside, the house reflected the same aesthetic as her shop: comfortable, organized, tasteful, without being showy. The front room served as both living room and library, with built-in bookshelves covering 2 walls. A comfortable sofa and armchair faced a small fireplace. The kitchen was updated, but retained its original charm, with white cabinets and butcher block countertops. Upstairs were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. She used one bedroom for sleeping and had converted the other into an office. That room contained more bookshelves, a desk, and filing cabinets. It was the only room in the house that hinted at her past life. The filing cabinets contained legal texts and reference materials she had brought with her when she moved to Briarfield. She rarely accessed them anymore, but she couldn't bring herself to get rid of them entirely. Beatrice prepared a simple dinner: grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a salad. She ate at her small kitchen table while reading the local newspaper. The Briarfield Gazette came out twice weekly and covered local news, sports, and events. Tonight's edition had a brief mention of tomorrow's town council meeting, but provided no details about the Riverside Ventures proposal. After dinner, she washed her dishes, made a cup of chamomile tea, and settled onto her sofa with a novel. She read for an hour, then switched to the television to watch the news. The national news always felt distant and slightly unreal to her now, like stories from another world. At 10 o'clock, she went upstairs, changed into her nightgown, and completed her bedtime routine. She lay in bed reading until her eyes grew heavy, then turned off the light. As she drifted toward sleep, her mind circled back to the mysterious business proposal. Something about it bothered her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what. Tomorrow, she thought, she would get answers. Beatrice arrived at the town hall at 6:30 the following evening, half an hour before the meeting was scheduled to begin. She wanted to secure a good seat and observe people as they arrived. The town hall was a handsome brick building, dating from the 1920s, with white columns flanking the entrance and a cupola on top. Inside, the main meeting room had high ceilings, tall windows, and rows of wooden chairs facing a raised platform where the council members sat. Already, a surprising number of people had gathered. Beatrice recognized most of them: shopkeepers, teachers, retirees, young families. The mood seemed tense, with people speaking in low, worried voices. She found a seat near the middle and settled in to watch and listen. Walter Simmons arrived shortly after and took the seat next to her. "Quite a turnout," he observed. "Indeed. More than I've seen for a regular council meeting. People are concerned. Word has gotten around that this Riverside Ventures might not be what it claims to be." "What are people saying?" Walter leaned closer and lowered his voice. "Rumors, mostly. Some think it's going to be a casino. Others think it might be a strip club or something similar. A few level-headed folks are saying we should wait and hear the actual proposal before panicking." Beatrice nodded. "Sensible advice, though I understand people's concerns." The room continued to fill. Beatrice noted the demographics, mostly older residents, which made sense for a weeknight meeting. Younger people with children were probably at home dealing with homework and bedtimes. She also noted several faces she didn't recognize, which was unusual for Briarfield. These strangers were well dressed in business attire and sat together in a group near the front. At 7 o'clock sharp, Mayor Robert Carson called the meeting to order. He was a man in his late 50s, balding and slightly overweight, who ran an insurance agency when he wasn't performing his mayoral duties. He had served as mayor for 12 years and was generally well liked, though some found him too eager to please and not decisive enough. "Good evening, everyone," the mayor said, banging his gavel. "We have a full agenda tonight, so let's get started. First, we'll approve the minutes from our last meeting, then discuss the budget amendment for the Public Works Department, and then we'll hear the proposal from Riverside Ventures regarding a new business on Main Street." The first two items passed quickly, with little discussion. Then the mayor said, "Now, we'll hear from Mr. Marcus Dalton, representing Riverside Ventures." "Mr. Dalton?" One of the well-dressed strangers stood and walked to a podium that had been set up facing the council. He was in his 40s, with slicked-back dark hair and an expensive suit. He smiled confidently as he placed papers on the podium. "Thank you, Mayor Carson, council members, and residents of Briarfield. My name is Marcus Dalton, and I'm here tonight representing Riverside Ventures. We're excited to present an opportunity that we believe will bring significant economic benefits to your community." He clicked a button, and a presentation appeared on a screen behind him. The first slide showed an architectural rendering of a modern building with large windows and elegant landscaping. Riverside Ventures proposes to open a premier adult recreation center right here in Briarfield. This facility will feature dining, entertainment, and social spaces designed for discerning adults seeking high-quality leisure experiences. The wording was carefully vague, Beatrice noted. He hadn't actually said what the facility would do, only that it would provide recreation and entertainment. Dalton continued, "We project that this center will create approximately 40 jobs for local residents. It will also increase foot traffic to downtown businesses and generate substantial tax revenue for the town. We estimate an annual contribution of over $200,000 to the town's tax base." Murmurs rippled through the audience. $200,000 was significant for a town of Briarfield's size. The proposed location is the old Morrison warehouse on Main Street, which has sat vacant for nearly a decade. We would completely renovate the building, preserving its historic facade while modernizing the interior. Construction would employ local contractors and tradespeople. More slides showed interior renderings, elegant dining areas, private meeting rooms, a bar area. Everything looked upscale and sophisticated. "We're asking the town council to approve our business license and grant the necessary zoning variances to allow this type of establishment on Main Street. We've prepared detailed plans that address parking, noise, and all other relevant concerns." He smiled again. "I'm happy to answer any questions you might have." A dozen hands shot up immediately. The mayor pointed to Jack Wilson, who owned the hardware store. "Mr. Dalton, you keep saying recreation center and entertainment, but you haven't actually told us what this place will be. What specifically will go on there?" Dalton's smile didn't waver. "The center will offer a variety of amenities. Fine dining, a cocktail lounge, private event spaces, and yes, some gaming opportunities for our members." "Gaming?" Jack persisted. "You mean gambling?" "Limited gaming, yes. Poker, blackjack, and similar card games. All perfectly legal under the state's social gaming laws, as we'll be operating as a private membership club." The room erupted in voices. People shouted questions and objections simultaneously. The mayor banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order, please, one at a time." When the room quieted, Sarah Mitchell, who served on the council, spoke up. "Mr. Dalton, I'm familiar with state law regarding social gaming. Those laws allow small-scale poker games in private homes and clubs, not commercial gambling operations." "That's correct, Councilwoman Mitchell, which is why we're structuring this as a membership club, not a commercial casino. Members will pay an annual fee to join, and gaming will be a benefit of membership, not a business transaction. That seems like a loophole, Sarah said flatly. It's a legal structure that's been successfully used in many jurisdictions, Dalton replied smoothly. We have legal opinions from 2 different law firms confirming that our model complies with all applicable regulations. Walter leaned over to Beatrice and whispered, "What do you think?" "He's slick," she whispered back. "And he's probably technically correct about the law. The question is whether it's ethical." More questions followed. People asked about the membership fees, about who would be allowed to join, about what safeguards would be in place to prevent problem gambling. Dalton had smooth answers for everything, answers that sounded reasonable but revealed little. Finally, Beatrice raised her hand. The mayor, looking harried, pointed to her. "Yes, Mrs. Crowley?" She stood so everyone could hear her clearly. "Mr. Dalton, you mentioned you have legal opinions confirming your compliance with state law. Would you be willing to share those opinions publicly so the town's legal counsel can review them?" Dalton's smile flickered for just a moment before returning. "Those opinions are proprietary, Mrs. Crowley. However, I can assure you that we've done our due diligence." "I see. And regarding your claim that this will be a membership club, will membership be genuinely limited, or will you accept anyone who can pay the fee?" "Membership will be open to responsible adults. We'll screen applicants, of course." "Screen them for what?" "Financial stability, character references, that sort of thing." "So, essentially, anyone with money can join." Dalton's smile hardened. "We'll have standards, Mrs. Crowley. But those standards will be determined by your company, with no oversight from the town. We're a private business. We have the right to set our own membership criteria." Beatrice remained standing. "One more question, Mr. Dalton. Who owns Riverside Ventures?" "I'm not at liberty to disclose our investors' identities. Many of them value their privacy. So the town is being asked to approve a business, potentially involving gambling, operated by a company whose owners won't identify themselves. Does that strike anyone else as problematic?" Applause broke out from several audience members. Dalton's expression turned cold. "Mrs. Crowley, I'm not sure what you're implying, but Riverside Ventures is a legitimate company engaged in legitimate business. The identity of our investors is irrelevant to this proposal." "I disagree, Mr. Dalton. When a business asks for special treatment from a town, zoning variances, licensing approval, the town has every right to know who is behind that business." Mayor Carson intervened. "Thank you, Mrs. Crowley. You've raised some valid points. Mr. Dalton, while I understand the desire for privacy, I think the town would feel more comfortable if you could provide some information about your ownership structure." "I'll take that under advisement, Mayor." The meeting continued for another hour. People raised concerns about increased traffic, potential crime, the impact on property values, and the message it would send to have gambling in the town center. Proponents, including some council members, focused on the economic benefits and the jobs that would be created. Finally, the mayor said, "I think we've heard enough for tonight. The council will take everything under advisement. We'll schedule a vote on this proposal for our meeting 2 weeks from now. That will give everyone time to think about what's been discussed and for Mr. Dalton to provide any additional information we've requested." The meeting adjourned. As people filed out, many approached Beatrice to thank her for her questions. She deflected the praise gracefully, saying she was simply exercising her right as a citizen to be informed. Walter walked with her toward the exit. "That was impressive, Beatrice. You really put him on the spot. Someone needed to ask the hard questions." "True, but most people don't know what questions to ask. You clearly have some background in legal matters." Beatrice smiled slightly. "I've read a lot of legal thrillers. Walter laughed. Of course. Well, whatever the source of your knowledge, I'm glad you were here tonight. Outside, Beatrice found Marcus Dalton waiting near the steps. He approached her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Crowley, I wanted to thank you for your thoughtful questions tonight. I didn't ask them to be thanked, Mr. Dalton. Nevertheless, I appreciate engaged citizens. It's refreshing. I hope you'll keep an open mind as we move forward. This project really could be beneficial for Briarfield. I'm always open to facts and evidence, Mr. Dalton. Excellent. Perhaps we could meet sometime, and I could walk you through our plans in more detail. I think once you understand the full picture, you'll see that we're not the villains some people seem to think we are. Something in his tone made Beatrice's skin prickle. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't entirely friendly either. I don't think you're a villain, Mr. Dalton. I simply believe in transparency and accountability. As do I, Mrs. Crowley. As do I. He handed her a business card. If you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to contact me directly. She took the card and slipped it into her purse without looking at it. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Dalton. She walked away, aware of his eyes on her back. When she reached her car, she sat for a moment before starting the engine. Something was definitely wrong with this proposal. She couldn't prove it yet, but every instinct she possessed was screaming warnings. For years, she had kept her head down, avoided involvement in anything that might draw attention to her past. She had built a quiet, peaceful life in Briarfield, and she had been content with that. But now, her town was threatened, and she was one of the few people with the knowledge and skills to uncover the truth. The question was, could she do it without revealing who she used to be? That night, Beatrice couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with questions about Riverside Ventures. Finally, at 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went downstairs to make tea. Sitting at her kitchen table with her chamomile tea, she found herself thinking about the past she had tried so hard to leave behind. It had been 15 years since she had walked away from her life as a JAG officer, but tonight, that world felt very close. She rose and climbed the stairs to her office. She opened the filing cabinet and pulled out a file she hadn't touched in years. Inside were documents from her last case, the one that had ended her career, Captain Robert Henshaw. Just seeing his name in the file made her stomach clench. He had been accused of assault, a serious charge with serious consequences. The evidence against him had been substantial. The victim's testimony had been credible and detailed. Medical reports supported her account. Several witnesses had seen Henshaw and the victim together shortly before the incident. Beatrice had been assigned to prosecute the case. She had prepared meticulously, as she always did. She had built what she believed was an unassailable case. But Henshaw had powerful friends. His father was a retired general. His uncle was a congressman. The pressure had come from multiple directions, subtle but unmistakable. Suggestions that perhaps the case wasn't as strong as it appeared. Reminders that a conviction could damage the reputation of the entire unit. Questions about whether ruining a young officer's career over a misunderstanding was really in anyone's best interest. Beatrice had resisted. She had maintained that the evidence was clear and that justice demanded prosecution. But behind the scenes, deals had been made. Witnesses had become suddenly uncertain. The defense had produced an expert who cast doubt on the medical evidence. And in the end, the court had acquitted Henshaw on all charges. The victim had left the military shortly afterward, her career destroyed. Henshaw had received a promotion 2 years later. Beatrice had stayed in her position for another 6 months, trying to convince herself that she could still make a difference. That one miscarriage of justice didn't invalidate all the good she had done. but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had failed. Worse, that she had been complicit in that failure by not fighting harder, by not exposing the political pressure, by choosing her career over her principles. Finally, she had submitted her resignation. She had left the army with an honorable discharge and full benefits. She had moved to Briarfield, a town she had chosen almost at random from a list of small towns in the region. She had never looked back, until now. She closed the file and returned it to the cabinet. But she didn't go back to bed. Instead, she turned on her computer and began to research. She started with Marcus Dalton. A search of his name brought up a LinkedIn profile that described him as a business development consultant with experience in hospitality and entertainment ventures. The profile listed several previous employers, all companies involved in gaming or casino operations. His educational background showed a business degree from a mid-tier university. Digging deeper, she found mentions of Dalton in various business articles. He had been involved in opening several social clubs with gaming facilities in other states. Some of these clubs had later been investigated for various violations, though Dalton himself had never been charged with anything. He seemed to specialize in finding legal loopholes and pushing the boundaries of what was permissible. Next, she researched the owners of Riverside Ventures. This proved more difficult. The company was registered in Delaware, which had privacy-friendly corporate laws. The registered agent was a law firm that handled such registrations for thousands of companies. The actual owners were hidden behind layers of corporate structure. However, Beatrice had learned long ago that determined research could uncover almost anything. She began tracing the connections between Riverside Ventures and other companies. She looked at business filings, property records, and litigation history. She followed the trail through corporate acquisitions and name changes. By dawn, she had made some discoveries. Riverside Ventures appeared to be connected to a larger organization called Highland Entertainment Group. Highland operated several questionable gambling operations across multiple states. They had been sued numerous times for deceptive practices, though they typically settled these lawsuits out of court. More concerning, she found news articles suggesting that Highland had connections to organized crime. Nothing proven in court, but enough smoke to suggest fire. Law enforcement agencies in 3 states had investigated Highland for money laundering, though no charges had been filed. If Riverside Ventures was indeed connected to Highland, then Briarfield was facing something much more serious than a simple gambling club. They were potentially inviting organized crime into their town. But she needed more proof. What she had found so far was concerning, but circumstantial. She needed documents, financial records, something concrete. As morning light began to filter through her window, Beatrice realized what she had to do. She had to investigate this properly, using all the skills she had developed over 25 years in military law. She had to uncover the truth about Riverside Ventures and present it in a way that would convince the town council to reject their proposal. And she had to do it in 2 weeks. The question was where to start. In the military, she would have had access to investigators, subpoena power, databases, and resources. Here, she was just a retired bookshop owner with no official standing. But she had something else, a lifetime of experience in uncovering truth. And she was highly motivated. This was her town, her community. These were her neighbors and friends. She wouldn't stand by and watch them be exploited. She showered and dressed, then went downstairs to make breakfast. As she ate, she made a list of what she needed to do. 1. Research Highland Entertainment Group more thoroughly. 2. Find out who in Briarfield might be cooperating with Riverside Ventures 3. Talk to other towns where similar clubs had opened. 4. Review state gaming laws in detail. 5. Consult with someone who could help her understand the legal landscape. That last item made her pause. She had deliberately avoided contact with anyone from her old life. She had wanted a clean break, a fresh start. But now she might need to reach out. She had one friend from her JAG days who might be willing to help without asking too many questions. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Morrison had been a colleague and mentor. They had kept in sporadic contact over the years through holiday cards. Patricia was still in the JAG Corps based at the Pentagon. She would have access to information and resources. Beatrice found Patricia's last Christmas card and called the number listed. Morrison. The voice was crisp and professional, exactly as Beatrice remembered. Patricia, it's Beatrice Crowley. A pause. Beatrice? My God, it's been years. How are you? I'm well. I need to ask you a favor. Of course. What do you need? Beatrice explained the situation in Briarfield, describing the Riverside Ventures proposal and what she had discovered about Highland Entertainment Group. I need to know if there's any federal investigation into Highland. And I need to understand the legal framework better. I'm rusty on some of this. Let me make some calls. I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can find out. Patricia paused. Beatrice, are you sure you want to get involved in this? You left for a reason. I know, but this is my town, Patricia. These are my neighbors. I can't just stand by. I understand. Give me a couple of days. I'll get back to you. After they hung up, Beatrice felt both relieved and anxious. She had taken the first step back into a world she had sworn to leave behind. But it was necessary. She opened her bookshop at the usual time, though she was exhausted from her sleepless night. Customers came and went, and she performed her duties on autopilot. Her mind was elsewhere, planning her next moves. In the afternoon, Walter Simmons came in. He browsed for a while, then approached the counter with a serious expression. Beatrice, I've been thinking about last night. About your questions to Mr. Dalton. You seem to know exactly what to ask. I read a lot, Walter. I pay attention. It was more than that. You have legal training, don't you? Beatrice measured her response carefully. I studied law many years ago, yes. Did you practice? For a time. But that was another life, Walter. I'm a bookshop owner now. He nodded slowly. I respect your privacy, Beatrice. I just want you to know that if you're planning to do something about this Riverside Ventures situation, I'd like to help. Whatever you need, research, documentation, a friendly ear, I'm available. His offer touched her. Thank you, Walter. I may take you up on that. Over the next few days, Beatrice began her investigation in earnest. She spent her evenings researching, making phone calls, and documenting everything she found. She contacted city officials in towns where Highland Entertainment Group operated. She spoke with people who had been affected by those operations. The stories she heard were disturbing. In each town, the pattern was similar. A seemingly legitimate company would propose an upscale social club with limited gaming. The club would open and initially operate within legal bounds, but over time, the operation would expand. The gaming would become more prominent. Problem gambling would increase. Local businesses would suffer as people spent their money at the club instead of other establishments. And always, there were whispers of other activities happening behind the scenes. Money laundering, loan sharking, exploitation of vulnerable people who developed gambling addictions. But prosecuting these activities proved difficult. The companies were careful. They structured everything to appear legal on the surface. They hired good lawyers who knew how to exploit legal loopholes. And they intimidated witnesses who might testify against them. Beatrice documented all of this carefully. She created files with names, dates, incidents, and outcomes. She printed articles and saved web pages. She built a case, just as she had done hundreds of times before in the military. Patricia called back 3 days after their initial conversation. I have some information for you, though most of it isn't good news. Highland Entertainment Group is indeed under federal investigation for money laundering and racketeering. But the investigation has been ongoing for 2 years with little progress. These people are very good at covering their tracks. What about Riverside Ventures, specifically? The FBI believes it's a front company for Highland, but they can't prove it yet. The ownership structure is too complex. However, they're interested in what's happening in Briarfield. If Highland opens an operation there, it might give investigators another avenue to pursue. So the town would essentially become part of a federal investigation. Possibly. Though I should warn you, Beatrice, these are dangerous people. If you're thinking of opposing them publicly, you need to be careful. They don't respond well to obstacles. Noted. Thanks, Patricia. One more thing. I pulled your old case files, including the Henshaw case. I know that's why you left. I just want you to know. You did the right thing back then. You fought as hard as you could. What happened wasn't your fault. Beatrice felt her throat tighten. Thank you for saying that. I mean it. And whatever you decide to do in Briarfield, I'm here if you need me. After that call, Beatrice sat for a long time, processing everything. She now had confirmation that Riverside Ventures was connected to organized crime. She had evidence of what had happened in other towns. She had enough to present a compelling case against the proposal. But Patricia's warning echoed in her mind. These people were dangerous. If she exposed them publicly, there could be consequences. She thought of her quiet life in Briarfield, her bookshop, her friends, the peace she had found here. Was she willing to risk all of that? Then she thought of Tom Garcia, the teenager who dreamed of studying engineering, of Martha Henderson and her elementary school students, of all the families and businesses that would be affected if Highland Entertainment Group established a foothold in Briarfield. She had walked away once when faced with a difficult choice. She had let political pressure and fear determine her actions. She had lived with the regret of that decision for 15 years. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The next day was Saturday, and Beatrice closed her bookshop early. She had work to do, and she needed time to do it properly. She went home and spread her research across her dining room table, organizing it into categories: corporate structure, criminal connections, impacts on other communities, and legal analysis. She was deep in concentration when her doorbell rang. Opening it, she found Sarah Mitchell, the town council member, standing on her porch. Mrs. Crowley, I hope I'm not disturbing you. May I come in? Of course. Beatrice led her inside, quickly scooping papers into a pile to clear a chair. Would you like some coffee or tea? Coffee would be wonderful, thank you. As Beatrice prepared coffee in the kitchen, Sarah said, I wanted to talk to you about the Riverside Ventures proposal. Your questions at the meeting were excellent. They raised concerns I hadn't fully considered. Beatrice returned with 2 mugs of coffee and sat across from Sarah. What concerns are those? The lack of transparency, mainly. I've been on the council for 8 years, and I've never seen a business proposal like this one. Usually, people are eager to share their plans. This group has been evasive at every turn. Have you voted on similar proposals before? Not exactly like this, no. We've had businesses that wanted to serve alcohol, and we had to approve their licenses. But this is different. The gaming aspect changes everything. What's the mood on the council? Sarah sighed. Split. Mayor Carson is leaning toward approval. He's very focused on the economic benefits. Jim Thornton and Rachel Wu seem to be following his lead. But Tom Brewster and I have serious reservations. That leaves David Kim as the deciding vote, and he hasn't indicated which way he's leaning. So it could go either way. Yes, which is why I'm here. At the meeting, you clearly knew what questions to ask. You understood the legal implications better than anyone else in that room. I'm wondering if you might be willing to help me prepare a formal opposition to the proposal? Beatrice considered this carefully. Getting officially involved would mean exposing herself and her background. But Sarah was right. They needed someone who understood the legal issues. I can help, she said slowly. But I need you to understand something. I have experience with legal matters, but I'm not currently a practicing attorney. I can provide information and analysis, but I can't represent you or the town in any official capacity. That's fine. I just need help understanding what we're dealing with and how to present our concerns effectively. All right. But before we go further, I need to show you what I've found. For the next 2 hours, Beatrice walked Sarah through her research. She explained Highland Entertainment Group's history and their suspected criminal connections. She described what had happened in other towns. She laid out the legal framework and how Riverside Ventures was exploiting loopholes. Sarah's expression grew increasingly grave as she listened. This is worse than I thought. Much worse. Yes, and I believe we need to present all of this to the full council before they vote. Agreed. But how? At the next meeting, we'll have a vote on the proposal. There's no provision for new presentations or evidence. Then we need to request a special meeting. Or we need to convince Mayor Carson to table the vote pending further investigation. He won't like that. He's already made it clear he wants this decided quickly. Why do you think that is? Sarah hesitated. I hate to say this, but I've wondered if Dalton or his company has been in contact with the mayor privately. Carson has been unusually enthusiastic about this proposal. Has he received any campaign contributions from Riverside Ventures or related entities? I don't know. Campaign finance reports are public, but I haven't had time to check. I'll look into it, Beatrice said. In the meantime, you should reach out to Tom Brewster. See if he'll join you in requesting a special meeting or a delay in the vote. If 2 council members make the request, Carson will have a harder time refusing. You're right. Sarah stood. Thank you, Mrs. Crowley. I feel better knowing someone is looking into this properly. After Sarah left, Beatrice returned to her research. She searched for campaign finance records and found that Mayor Carson had indeed received a donation from a PAC called Business Growth Alliance 3 months ago. The donation was for $5,000, which was significant for a small-town mayor's campaign. She traced the PAC and found it was funded by several companies, including one that shared a business address with Highland Entertainment Group. It wasn't definitive proof of corruption, but it was certainly suggestive. She documented this finding and added it to her file. The next morning, Sunday, Beatrice attended church. She wasn't deeply religious, but she valued the community aspect of the weekly service. Afterward, during the coffee hour in the fellowship hall, she noticed people gathered in worried clusters, talking in low voices. Martha Henderson approached her. Mrs. Crowley, people are saying you asked important questions at the town meeting. Some folks are wondering if you could speak again at the next one. I'm planning to, if I'm allowed to. Good. Because there's something you should know. My husband works at the bank, and he told me, in confidence, that several businesses in town have been approached by Riverside Ventures. They've been offered deals to partner with the club once it opens. What kind of deals? Referral arrangements mostly. The club would send customers to local businesses, and those businesses would promote the club to their customers. The businesses would get a percentage of whatever money their referred customers spent at the club. Beatrice frowned. That could create financial incentives for businesses to encourage gambling. That's problematic. That's what I thought. And it explains why some business owners are supporting the proposal. They think it will help them financially. Do you know which businesses have been approached? Martha named several: the restaurant on Main Street, the boutique hotel, the wine shop, and others. All of them were owned by people who had spoken in favor of the proposal at the town meeting. Thank you for telling me this, Martha. It's important information. Over the next few days, Beatrice continued her investigation. She verified Martha's information by discreetly asking questions of people she trusted. She confirmed that Riverside Ventures had been systematically approaching local business owners, building support for their proposal through financial incentives. This was a common tactic for companies like Highland. They created networks of local supporters who had a financial stake in the company's success. Those supporters would then pressure the town council and defend the company in public forums. On Wednesday, 5 days before the scheduled vote, Sarah Mitchell called Beatrice. I have good news and bad news. Tom Brewster and I requested a special meeting to present new evidence about Riverside Ventures. Mayor Carson agreed, but reluctantly. The meeting is scheduled for this Friday evening, 2 days before the vote. That's not much time. I know. And here's the bad news. Carson is limiting the meeting to 2 hours and restricting who can speak. He says we've already heard from the public, so this meeting will be for council members only. No citizen comments. Can he do that? Technically, yes. He's the mayor, and he sets the agenda. Then we need to make the most of those 2 hours. How much time will you and Tom have to present? 30 minutes each. The rest of the time will be devoted to discussion and questions. All right. Let me help you prepare. Beatrice spent the next 2 days working with Sarah and Tom, helping them organize their presentations. She created visual aids showing Highland Entertainment Group's corporate structure and connections. She prepared handouts documenting problems in other towns. She drafted talking points that explained the legal issues in clear, accessible language. Tom Brewster, who owned a hardware store, proved to be a quick study. He grasped the financial implications immediately and focused his presentation on how the club would harm local businesses in the long run, despite the short-term incentives some owners had been offered. Sarah concentrated on the legal and ethical issues, arguing that the town had a responsibility to protect its residents from exploitation. On Friday evening, Beatrice arrived at the town hall early once again. The meeting room was even more crowded than before. Many people had heard about the special meeting and wanted to attend, even though they wouldn't be able to speak. The atmosphere was tense. Beatrice could see supporters of the proposal sitting together, including several business owners who had been offered deals by Riverside Ventures. Opponents sat in a separate section. In the middle were undecided people, trying to sort through conflicting information. Marcus Dalton was present, along with 2 other well-dressed individuals who appeared to be lawyers. They sat in the front row, exuding confidence. Mayor Carson called the meeting to order. This special meeting has been called at the request of council members Mitchell and Brewster to present additional information regarding the Riverside Ventures proposal. We'll hear their presentations, followed by discussion. I remind everyone that this is a council meeting, not a public forum. Only council members will be speaking tonight. Tom Brewster went first. He laid out the economic arguments clearly and persuasively. He showed how similar clubs in other towns had initially appeared beneficial, but had ultimately hurt local economies. He explained how the referral arrangements being offered to local businesses would create perverse incentives and could even constitute illegal kickbacks depending on how they were structured. His presentation was solid, but Beatrice could see that Mayor Carson looked unmoved. Jim Thornton and Rachel Wu, the council members who typically voted with the mayor, whispered to each other and seemed dismissive. Then Sarah Mitchell took her turn. She began by displaying the corporate structure chart Beatrice had created, showing the connections between Riverside Ventures and Highland Entertainment Group. This is not just a local business, Sarah said clearly. This is a front company for an organization that is currently under federal investigation for money laundering and racketeering. Gasps rippled through the audience. Marcus Dalton's face darkened. Sarah continued, presenting document after document. She showed news articles about Highland's operations in other states. She quoted law enforcement officials who had investigated Highland. She presented testimony from people whose lives had been damaged by gambling addictions fostered by Highland's clubs. It was devastating. And Sarah delivered it calmly and methodically, citing sources for every claim, providing documentation for every assertion. Mayor Carson tried to interrupt several times, but Sarah politely insisted on finishing her presentation. When she concluded, she said, "I move that the council reject the Riverside Ventures proposal and direct the town attorney to investigate whether there are grounds for filing a complaint with state authorities." "I second the motion," Tom Brewster said immediately. The room erupted in applause from those opposing the proposal. Mayor Carson banged his gavel. "Order! We'll now have discussion. I recognize Mr. Dalton, who has requested an opportunity to respond." Dalton stood, and Beatrice could see that he was angry, though he was trying to control it. "Mayor, council members, what you've just heard is a collection of innuendo, speculation, and unproven accusations. Riverside Ventures is a legitimate business. We have broken no laws. The fact that our parent company is under investigation means nothing. No charges have been filed, no wrongdoing has been proven. But the pattern is clear," Sarah interjected. "Everywhere Highland operates, there are problems. Are we supposed to ignore that?" "You're supposed to base your decision on facts, not fear-mongering," Dalton shot back. "Everything we've proposed is completely legal. We've met every requirement. And I might add, Councilwoman Mitchell, that some of your sources are questionable. Where did you get all this information? Who helped you compile it?" Sarah hesitated for just a moment, and Beatrice saw Dalton notice it. He pressed forward. "This looks like a professional investigation. I'm wondering if the town has hired outside counsel without informing the public. Or perhaps there's someone in this room with a personal vendetta against our company." All eyes turned toward Beatrice. She kept her expression neutral, but her heart was racing. This was the moment she had dreaded. Mayor Carson said, "Mr. Dalton, I don't think wild accusations are helpful." "I'm not making accusations, Mayor. I'm asking legitimate questions. The public has a right to know who is influencing this decision and what their qualifications are." Tom Brewster spoke up. "Councilwoman Mitchell did her own research. She doesn't need help from anyone to read public documents and news articles." "Perhaps," Dalton said. "But the sophistication of this presentation suggests legal expertise. I think the town deserves to know who's really behind this opposition." Beatrice realized she had a choice. She could stay silent and let Sarah and Tom defend themselves. Or she could step forward and own her role. She thought of the Henshaw case. She thought of her failure to stand up forcefully enough when it mattered. She thought of the regret that had haunted her for 15 years. She stood. "I helped Councilwoman Mitchell with her research," she said clearly. "My name is Beatrice Crowley. I own the bookshop on Main Street. And yes, I have legal training. I'm a retired military attorney. I served as a JAG officer for 25 years. I helped analyze the documents and organize the presentation because I have the skills to do so and because I care about this town." The room fell silent. People stared at her, surprised. Few had known about her background. Marcus Dalton smiled slightly. "I see. And did you disclose your involvement to the council?" "I didn't need to. I'm a private citizen exercising my right to participate in civic matters. I've broken no laws and violated no ethical rules." But you do have a bias, don't you? Based on your background, you're predisposed to see criminal activity where there might be none. My background gives me expertise in recognizing problematic legal structures and questionable business practices. I would call that knowledge, not bias. Or perhaps, Dalton said smoothly, your eagerness to find problems comes from something in your own past. Why did you leave the military, Mrs. Crowley? What happened that made you give up a successful career? Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. He had investigated her. He knew. The room was utterly silent now, everyone waiting for her response. She could deflect. She could refuse to answer. She could let the mystery stand. Or she could finally tell the truth. Beatrice remained standing, looking directly at Marcus Dalton. Her voice was steady when she spoke. I left the military because I failed to achieve justice in an important case. A man I knew was guilty was acquitted because of political pressure and institutional corruption. I resigned because I couldn't continue serving in a system that allowed that to happen. She paused, then continued. So, yes, Mr. Dalton, I'm sensitive to corruption. I'm vigilant about powerful people exploiting legal loopholes to avoid accountability. If that's a bias, then I embrace it. Because what I learned from my failure is that good people must speak up when they see wrongdoing. They must use whatever skills and knowledge they have to prevent injustice. That's what I'm doing now. The room remained silent for a long moment. Then someone began to clap. Others joined in. Soon, much of the room was applauding. Dalton's expression hardened. Very stirring, Mrs. Crowley. But emotional speeches don't change the facts. Our proposal is legal, and we've met all requirements. This council has no legitimate grounds to reject it. Mayor Carson cleared his throat. Let's continue with our discussion. Councilmember Wu, do you have any questions? Rachel Wu, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I do. Mrs. Crowley, you mentioned Highland Entertainment Group is under federal investigation. Can you tell us more about that? Beatrice was grateful for the question. It gave her an opportunity to provide more information. I spoke with sources in federal law enforcement. Highland is being investigated for money laundering and racketeering. The investigation has been ongoing for 2 years. While no charges have been filed yet, the investigation is active and serious. How do we know these sources are reliable? Jim Thornton asked. He was one of the council members who typically supported Mayor Carson. I can provide documentation from my sources if needed, but I would also encourage the council to make its own inquiries. Contact the FBI's field office. Contact state law enforcement. They can confirm what I'm telling you. David Kim, the undecided council member, spoke for the first time. Mrs. Crowley, in your professional opinion, what would be the legal consequences for Briarfield if we approve this proposal and it later turns out that Highland is engaging in criminal activity? It was exactly the right question. Beatrice answered carefully. If federal authorities build a case against Highland, any properties or businesses associated with them could be subject to seizure under asset forfeiture laws. That could mean the town would lose the tax revenue that's been promised. Additionally, the town could face civil liability if people are harmed by illegal activities occurring at the club. And finally, the town's reputation would suffer. Briarfield would be known as the place that welcomed organized crime. That's speculation, Mayor Carson said quickly. We can't base our decision on things that might or might not happen. With respect, Mayor, Beatrice replied, risk assessment is exactly what you should be doing. When someone offers you a deal that seems too good to be true, 40 jobs, $200,000 in tax revenue, all from a simple social club, you need to ask why. What's the catch? What are the hidden costs? Sarah Mitchell added, and we need to consider the precedent this sets. If we approve Riverside Ventures despite all these red flags, what message does that send? That Briarfield will overlook questionable practices if the money is good enough? Tom Brewster said, I've lived in this town my whole life. My father owned the hardware store before me, and his father before him. We've weathered economic downturns and tough times, but we've always maintained our integrity. We've always been a place where people could raise families and feel safe. I don't want to be the generation that traded that away for tax revenue. His words seemed to resonate with David Kim, who nodded thoughtfully. The discussion continued for another hour. Marcus Dalton and his lawyers argued that the town was being manipulated by fear and unfounded allegations. They insisted that Riverside Ventures had done nothing wrong and deserved approval. But the damage had been done. Sarah's presentation, combined with Beatrice's credibility as a former JAG officer, had created serious doubt. Even council members who had been inclined to support the proposal were now hesitant. Finally, Mayor Carson said, We need to make a decision. The vote is scheduled for Sunday. I suggest we table this discussion until then and let everyone think about what they've heard tonight. I renew my motion to reject the proposal, Sarah said. And I second it, Tom confirmed. Very well. We'll vote on Sunday. Meeting adjourned. As people filed out, many approached Beatrice to thank her or ask questions. She answered patiently, aware that Marcus Dalton was watching her from across the room. Finally, when the crowd had thinned, he approached. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Crowley. I don't think so. You've made yourself an enemy tonight. Highland doesn't forget people who cost them money. Is that a threat, Mr. Dalton? It's a fact. You should think carefully about whether this is really worth it. I have thought about it. And yes, it's worth it. He studied her for a moment, then shook his head. You could have had a quiet retirement. Instead, you chose to stick your nose where it doesn't belong. I hope you don't regret it. He walked away, leaving Beatrice with a cold feeling in her stomach. She wasn't naive. She knew she had made powerful people angry. There could be consequences. But she also knew she had done the right thing. Walter Simmons approached as she gathered her things. Beatrice, I had no idea about your background. 25 years as a military attorney? That's impressive. It's in the past, Walter. Perhaps. But it seems the past has caught up with you. Are you going to be all right? That man, Dalton, seemed quite hostile. I'll be fine. I've dealt with hostile people before. Nevertheless, I think you should be careful. And if you need anything, someone to walk you home, someone to check on you, please let me know. His concern touched her. Thank you, Walter. I will. That night, Beatrice slept restlessly. She kept hearing Dalton's warning in her mind. She had dealt with dangerous people during her military career, but that had been in an official capacity, with the full weight of the military justice system behind her. Now she was just a bookshop owner who had antagonized organized crime. But she reminded herself that she wasn't alone. The town was watching now. People knew what was happening. That provided some protection. Saturday passed slowly. Beatrice opened her bookshop but found it difficult to concentrate. Several customers asked about the town meeting, having heard about her revelation. She answered their questions politely but briefly, not wanting to dwell on her past. In the afternoon, Sarah Mitchell stopped by. Beatrice, I wanted to thank you again. What you did last night took courage. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You put yourself on the line for this town. People won't forget it. Sarah paused. I think we have the votes to reject the proposal tomorrow. David Kim told me privately that he's voting no. That gives us 4 votes to 3. That's good news. It is. but I'm worried about what happens next. Dalton and his company aren't going to just go away quietly. They've invested time and money in this proposal. They'll probably threaten legal action. They might even sue the town. But ultimately, the town has the right to approve or reject business licenses. As long as the decision isn't based on illegal discrimination, the town should prevail. Should prevail. But legal battles are expensive. Yes. But sometimes they're necessary. Sunday morning arrived with dark clouds and a steady rain. Beatrice attended church service, which felt appropriate. She needed the comfort of ritual and community. At the coffee hour afterward, the mood was tense. Everyone knew about the vote that evening. People speculated about the outcome and debated the merits of the proposal. Beatrice stayed quiet, listening. The vote was scheduled for 7 o'clock. By 6:30, the town hall meeting room was packed. Every seat was filled, and people stood along the walls. It seemed like half the town had come to witness this decision. Beatrice found a seat next to Walter. "Quite a turnout," he observed. "This is a defining moment for Briarfield," she replied. "People want to be part of it." Mayor Carson called the meeting to order. He looked unhappy, which Beatrice took as a good sign. If he had been confident of approval, he would have looked more pleased. "We're here to vote on the Riverside Ventures proposal," he said tersely. "We've heard all the arguments. It's time to make a decision. The motion on the floor, made by Councilmember Mitchell and seconded by Councilmember Brewster, is to reject the proposal. I'll call the roll. Councilmember Thornton? No, I vote against the motion," which meant he was voting to approve the proposal. Councilmember Wu? No, I vote against the motion. That was expected. 2 votes to approve so far. Councilmember Kim? David Kim took a breath. I vote yes. I vote to reject the proposal. Applause broke out. Mayor Carson banged his gavel. Order! Councilmember Brewster? Yes. I vote to reject the proposal. Councilmember Mitchell? Yes. I vote to reject the proposal. 3 votes to reject. The mayor's vote wouldn't matter now, as the motion had a clear majority, but he would still cast it. I vote no. I vote against the motion to reject. He paused, then continued. The motion passes 3-3, with the tie broken by... Wait, no. Let me recount. He had made an error in his haste. Sarah Mitchell spoke up calmly. Mr. Mayor, 3 members voted yes to reject. 2 members voted no. The motion passes 3-2. The proposal is rejected. Carson's face reddened. Yes, of course. The proposal is rejected. He banged his gavel. This matter is closed. Meeting adjourned. The room erupted in cheers and applause from those who had opposed the proposal. Beatrice remained seated, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. They had protected Briarfield. Marcus Dalton and his lawyers stood and left immediately, their expressions furious. As Dalton passed Beatrice's seat, he leaned down and whispered, "This isn't over." Then he was gone. People swarmed around Sarah, Tom, and David Kim, thanking them and congratulating them. Beatrice slipped out quietly, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She had played her part, but this was their victory. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled fresh and clean. Beatrice walked slowly toward her car, feeling exhausted but satisfied. Mrs. Crowley! She turned to see Martha Henderson hurrying toward her. I just wanted to thank you. What you did, standing up like that, revealing your past, that took real courage. I just provided some information, Martha. The council made the decision. You did much more than that. You gave people the facts they needed to make the right choice, and you risked your privacy to do it. Martha squeezed her hand. You're a hero, Mrs. Crowley. I'm no hero. I'm just someone who tried to help her community. That's exactly what a hero is. As Beatrice drove home through the dark streets, she reflected on Martha's words. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had finally found the courage to use her skills and knowledge for good without worrying about the personal cost. For 15 years, she had hidden from her past. She had tried to be someone new, someone without connections to that earlier life. But tonight had taught her that the past wasn't something to hide from. It was part of who she was. Her experience, her training, her knowledge, these were tools that could be used to help others. She had been given a second chance, and she had taken it. Life in Briarfield began to return to normal over the following days. The excitement over the town council vote faded, and people went back to their routines. But things had changed subtly. People who had never been particularly friendly to Beatrice now greeted her warmly on the street. Customers asked her opinion on local issues. She was invited to serve on the library board and the Historical Society committee. She had become, without seeking it, a respected figure in the community. Beatrice accepted some invitations and politely declined others. She wanted to remain engaged, but not overwhelmed. She still had a bookshop to run, after all. 2 weeks after the vote, Walter Simmons came into the shop with a newspaper. Have you seen this? It was the regional newspaper, which covered several counties. The headline read, "Federal Investigation Expands into Highland Entertainment Group. Multiple Properties Seized." Beatrice read the article quickly. Federal authorities had executed search warrants at several Highland Entertainment Group locations across 3 states. They had seized records and arrested several executives on money laundering charges. The article mentioned that the investigation had been ongoing for years, but had recently gained momentum. "Your timing was impeccable," Walter said. "If the council had approved that proposal, Briarfield would be part of this mess right now. I'm glad we avoided that." "Do you think Dalton knew about the federal investigation?" "He knew something was happening, but he probably didn't know how close the authorities were to making arrests. These companies rely on staying one step ahead of law enforcement. This time, they didn't move fast enough." Over the next few weeks, more information emerged. Highland Entertainment Group had been operating an extensive criminal enterprise, using their social clubs to launder money from various illegal sources. The Riverside Ventures proposal in Briarfield had been part of their expansion strategy. If they had established a foothold in the town, Briarfield would have become a node in their criminal network. Marcus Dalton was arrested in connection with the investigation. Beatrice felt no satisfaction in hearing this news, only relief that he wouldn't be able to harm anyone else. Mayor Robert Carson resigned from his position a month after the vote. He claimed personal reasons, but rumor had it that questions about his relationship with Riverside Ventures had made his position untenable. An investigation revealed that the campaign donation he had received had indeed come from entities connected to Highland. While not illegal, it had been ethically questionable. He left politics permanently, returning to his insurance business full-time. David Kim was appointed interim mayor and subsequently won the special election to fill the position permanently. His first act was to establish stricter transparency requirements for any new business proposals in Briarfield. Life continued. Fall turned to winter. Beatrice enjoyed the changing seasons, appreciating the beauty of small-town life even more after nearly losing it. She had come to understand that her years in Briarfield weren't about hiding from her past, but about building something new without denying what came before. One snowy December morning, Patricia Morrison called. "Beatrice, I wanted to update you. The Henshaw case has been reopened." Beatrice felt her heart skip. "What? How?" New evidence emerged. Another victim came forward, and her testimony led investigators to find evidence that had been suppressed in the original trial. Henshaw has been arrested and charged. This time, there's no political interference. The case is solid. Beatrice sat down heavily. I don't know what to say. Justice delayed isn't justice denied, Patricia said gently. Sometimes it just takes longer than we'd like. But the important thing is that you were right all along. Henshaw was guilty, and now he'll face consequences. What about the original victim? She's been contacted. I can't share details, but I understand she feels vindicated. Your work on that case, even though the original verdict went the wrong way, created a record that helped the new investigation. After they hung up, Beatrice sat in her bookshop, thinking about what Patricia had told her. For 15 years, she had carried guilt about the Henshaw case. She had believed she had failed completely. But perhaps her failure hadn't been as complete as she'd thought. Perhaps some failures were just deferred successes. That evening, Tom Garcia came into the shop. He was on winter break from high school. Mrs. Crowley, I wanted to tell you, I got into State University. Full scholarship for engineering. Tom, that's wonderful. Congratulations. I couldn't have done it without you. All the books you recommended, the conversations we had about science and learning, they helped me more than you know. I wanted to say thank you. You did the work, Tom. I just provided some books. You did more than that. You believed in me. That mattered. After he left, Beatrice reflected on the different ways people could make a difference. She had saved Briarfield from organized crime, yes, but she had also encouraged a young man's dreams. She had provided books that educated and entertained. She had created a space where people could gather and think and learn. All of it mattered. All of it was worthwhile. That Christmas, Beatrice received cards from people across Briarfield, thanking her for her service to the community. She was invited to multiple holiday parties and dinners. She attended some and politely declined others, maintaining her balance between engagement and solitude. On Christmas Eve, as she sat in her cozy living room with a fire crackling and a cup of tea warming her hands, she thought about how far she had come. 15 years ago, she had arrived in Briarfield, broken and searching for peace. She had found it, but not in the way she expected. Peace hadn't come from hiding or forgetting. It had come from accepting all parts of herself, the triumphs and failures, the knowledge and experience, the wounds and the wisdom. It had come from using her gifts to serve others without seeking recognition or reward. She had been given a chance to redeem her perceived failure. She had taken that chance. And in doing so, she had discovered that redemption wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning from it and choosing to act differently going forward. Spring arrived in Briarfield with its usual explosion of color. Dogwoods bloomed pink and white along the streets. Daffodils and tulips filled flower beds. The air grew warm and gentle, perfect for sitting on front porches and taking evening walks. Beatrice had settled back into her routine, but with a new dimension. She was no longer just the quiet bookshop owner. She had become someone people turned to for advice and perspective on community issues. The library board had asked her to help develop a civic education program for high school students. She agreed, designing a curriculum that taught students about local government, civic responsibility, and how ordinary citizens could make a difference. Tom Garcia, home for spring break, helped her pilot the program with a group of younger students. The Historical Society asked her to write a series of articles about Briarfield's history for the local newspaper. She discovered she enjoyed the research and writing, and the articles proved popular with readers. But she was careful not to overextend herself. She still prioritized her bookshop, still maintained her quiet evenings at home, still protected the peaceful life she had built. The difference was that she no longer felt she was hiding. She was simply living, fully and authentically. One April afternoon, a woman Beatrice didn't recognize entered the bookshop. She was in her 30s, professionally dressed, carrying a leather briefcase. She browsed for a few minutes, then approached the counter. "Are you Beatrice Crowley?" "I am." "My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm an attorney with the State Attorney General's office. I was hoping I could speak with you privately." Beatrice felt a flutter of concern. "Of course. Let me just lock the door and turn the sign." She secured the shop, then led Rebecca to the back room where they could talk without interruption. "Mrs. Crowley, I'm here because of your involvement in the Riverside Ventures case. Your research and analysis were invaluable in helping federal authorities build their case against Highland Entertainment Group." "I was just trying to protect my town." "You did much more than that. The documents you helped compile, the connections you identified, they filled in gaps in the federal investigation. Several of the people who were arrested have already pleaded guilty, in part because the evidence was so strong." "I'm glad the investigation was successful." Rebecca opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "The Attorney General wants to thank you. We've also reviewed your background, Mrs. Crowley. Your record as a JAG officer was exemplary. We understand you resigned after a difficult case, but your skills and integrity are evident." She placed the folder on the table between them. "We'd like to offer you a consulting position with the state's Public Integrity Unit. We investigate corruption in local government and organizations. It's part-time, flexible work. You could continue running your bookshop while helping us on cases that require your particular expertise." Beatrice stared at the folder, not opening it. "I left that life behind. You left the military, but you never stopped being someone who cares about justice. The work you did on the Riverside Ventures case proves that." "I don't know if I want to go back to that kind of work, even part-time." Rebecca nodded understandingly. "I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm simply offering an opportunity. Take the folder, read the materials, think about it. If you decide it's not for you, there's no pressure." After Rebecca left, Beatrice sat alone in the back room for a long time, looking at the folder but not opening it. Finally, she picked it up and took it home. That evening, she read through the materials. The position description emphasized that consultants worked on specific projects, providing expert analysis and testimony when needed. They weren't full-time employees and had no administrative responsibilities. The work was exactly what she was good at: researching complex situations, identifying legal issues, and explaining them clearly to others. The salary offered was generous, though Beatrice didn't need the money. Her military pension was adequate, and the bookshop generated enough income to cover her modest expenses. But it wasn't about the money. It was about using her skills to help people. It was about preventing the kind of corruption and injustice that she had witnessed too often in her career. She thought about it for several days. She talked to Walter about it, valuing his perspective. "It seems to me," Walter said, "that you've already decided. You've just been afraid to admit it." "What makes you say that?" "Because you're still keeping current with legal developments. You're still reading case law and following court decisions. You never really left that world, Beatrice. You just took a break from it." He was right, she realized. Her office upstairs still contained all her legal reference materials. She still subscribed to legal journals. She still followed Supreme Court decisions. She had never truly walked away from the law. She had just stepped back from practicing it. "If you take this position," Walter continued, "you won't be abandoning your life here. You'll be adding to it. You'll still have your bookshop. You'll still be part of this community. You'll just also be helping other communities when they need it." 2 weeks later, Beatrice called Rebecca Chen and accepted the position. The consulting work integrated smoothly into Beatrice's life. Most of it she could do from home, reviewing documents and preparing reports. Occasionally, she traveled to other towns to observe situations or provide expert testimony. But these trips were short, usually just a day or two. Her first assignment involved a small town where the mayor was suspected of accepting kickbacks from a construction company. Beatrice reviewed the financial records, identified patterns of suspicious payments, and prepared a report that helped investigators build their case. The mayor eventually resigned and pleaded guilty to corruption charges. Her second case involved a nonprofit organization that was misusing state grant funds. Beatrice's analysis revealed a complex scheme to divert money to the organization's executives. Her testimony helped ensure that the funds were recovered and the people responsible were prosecuted. She found the work satisfying in a way she hadn't expected. Unlike her years in the military, where institutional pressures sometimes clouded justice, this work felt pure. She was simply presenting facts, helping truth emerge, letting justice follow its course. And she was good at it. Her reports were clear and thorough. Her testimony was credible and persuasive. Judges and juries trusted her because she never overstated her conclusions or advocated beyond what the evidence supported. The bookshop continued to thrive. In fact, business improved as Beatrice's reputation in the region grew. People would drive from neighboring towns specifically to visit Crowley's books, curious to meet the woman they had read about in news articles about corruption cases. Beatrice was amused by this. She had spent 15 years trying to be invisible, and now she had become modestly famous. But she accepted it with good humor. People who came to gawk usually ended up buying books, which was good for business. Tom Garcia returned from his first year of college that summer. He had done well in his engineering courses and was excited about his studies. He still visited the bookshop regularly, and Beatrice enjoyed hearing about his experiences. "You know, Mrs. Crowley," he said one day, "I never thanked you properly for what you did last year. Stopping that gambling club from opening. My dad told me that those places destroy families. If it had opened here, who knows what would have happened to some of us." "You don't need to thank me, Tom. I was just doing what any concerned citizen would do." "Not anyone. Most people would have kept their heads down, not wanting to get involved. You put yourself out there. You used your knowledge to help people. That's special." His words touched her more than he knew. She had spent so many years thinking her knowledge was tainted by her failure in the Henshaw case. But perhaps that failure had actually made her more determined to use her knowledge properly going forward. That summer, Sarah Mitchell approached Beatrice with a new concern. A developer wanted to build a large housing complex on the edge of town, on land that included wetlands and habitat for several protected species. The developer claimed to have all necessary permits, but Sarah suspected something wasn't right. "Would you be willing to look into this?" Sarah asked. "Not as a state consultant, but as a concerned citizen?" Beatrice agreed. She reviewed the permit applications and environmental impact assessments. She found several irregularities: permits that had been fast-tracked without proper review, environmental reports that glossed over significant concerns, and unexplained payments to consulting firms. She shared her findings with Sarah, who brought them to the town council. The council voted to delay approval of the project pending a thorough environmental review. The developer, faced with increased scrutiny, eventually withdrew the proposal. Once again, Beatrice's expertise had protected Briarfield. But this time, she had worked quietly behind the scenes, letting Sarah take the public role. She had learned that she didn't need recognition. She just needed to be useful. As fall approached, Beatrice received a letter that surprised her. It was from the victim in the Henshaw case, the original case that had ended her JAG career. The woman, now in her 40s, wrote to thank Beatrice for her work on the case. "I know you felt you failed me," the letter read, "but you didn't. You believed me when others doubted. You fought for me even when the system was rigged against us. I want you to know that your support meant everything to me. It helped me survive when I felt alone. And even though we didn't win back then, justice has finally been served. Henshaw was convicted 2 months ago and is serving a long sentence. Your original investigation created the foundation for the new case. The prosecutor told me that without your detailed reports and documentation, they wouldn't have had enough to proceed. So you see, you didn't fail. You just didn't get to see your victory right away." Beatrice read the letter multiple times, tears streaming down her face. For 15 years, she had carried the weight of perceived failure. Now, that weight lifted. She wrote back to the woman, thanking her for the letter and expressing her admiration for the woman's courage in coming forward a second time. "You're the real hero in this story," Beatrice wrote. "You refused to let injustice stand, even when it cost you greatly. I'm honored to have played a small part in your journey toward justice." The correspondence continued over the following months. The two women never met in person. They lived too far apart, and both preferred to maintain some privacy. But they became pen pals of a sort, sharing thoughts about justice, healing, and moving forward after trauma. That winter, Beatrice turned 69. She marked the occasion quietly, with dinner at her favorite restaurant and a gathering of friends afterward at the bookshop. Martha Henderson organized it, bringing cake and decorations. As Beatrice looked around at the people who had become her community, Walter, Martha, Tom, Sarah, and dozens of others, she felt profoundly grateful. She had come to Briarfield searching for peace, and she had found it. But she had found something more valuable too: purpose. She had learned that peace without purpose was simply hiding. True peace came from being fully yourself, using your gifts, accepting your past, and choosing to make a positive difference in whatever ways you could. "Thank you all for coming," she said, when Martha asked her to say a few words. "Briarfield gave me a home when I needed one. You gave me friendship and community. You let me just be a bookshop owner for years, asking nothing more of me. And then, when my particular skills were needed, you let me step forward without judgment. You accepted all of who I am. That's a rare gift, and I treasure it." "We treasure you," Walter said, raising his glass. "To Beatrice, bookshop owner, protector of Briarfield, and the best damn friend anyone could ask for." Everyone raised their glasses. To Beatrice. Word of Beatrice's work spread through professional networks. Other small towns facing similar challenges began reaching out, asking for advice or assistance. She couldn't help everyone. She was, after all, just one person with a bookshop to run. But she helped when she could, providing guidance, reviewing documents, or connecting people with appropriate resources. She became an informal mentor to several young attorneys who were interested in public integrity work. They would call or email with questions, and she would share her experience and wisdom. She found this role deeply satisfying. Perhaps she couldn't change the whole system, but she could help shape the next generation of people working within it. One of these young attorneys, Jordan Wells, visited Briarfield to meet Beatrice in person. Jordan was in his late 20s, fresh out of law school, and passionate about fighting corruption. "I read about what you did here," Jordan said as they sat in the bookshop's back room. "How you uncovered the connections to organized crime and stopped them from establishing a foothold. That's exactly the kind of work I want to do." "It's difficult work," Beatrice cautioned. "You'll face powerful people who don't like being exposed. You'll deal with systems that resist change. You'll sometimes lose despite doing everything right." "I know, but someone has to do it. And I'd rather try and sometimes fail than not try at all. His words echoed thoughts Beatrice had grappled with for years. You're right. The trying matters. How do you deal with the failures? Beatrice considered the question. I think you have to measure success differently. Not every case will end with a conviction or a clear victory. But if you've exposed truth, if you've made wrongdoing more difficult, if you've helped even one person, that's success. Justice isn't always immediate or complete. Sometimes it unfolds over years. The Henshaw case taught me that. She told Jordan about that case, about her resignation, about her years of feeling she had failed. But I learned that my work on that case mattered, even though I didn't see it at the time. The records I created, the investigation I conducted, it all contributed to eventual justice. So now I try to focus on doing thorough, honest work, and I trust that the impact will be what it needs to be. Jordan left inspired, and Beatrice felt good about their conversation. If her experience could help younger people avoid some of the mistakes she had made, that was valuable. Spring arrived again, completing a full cycle since Beatrice had taken on her consulting role. She had worked on 8 cases, contributed to 3 convictions, helped recover over $2 million in misappropriated funds, and prevented several questionable projects from proceeding in various towns. But perhaps more importantly, she had maintained her balance. She still loved running her bookshop. She still enjoyed quiet evenings at home. She still took walks around Briarfield, appreciating its beauty and rhythm. The consulting work had enhanced her life rather than consuming it. One warm May afternoon, Beatrice received a call from Rebecca Chen. Beatrice, I have a situation that's perfect for you. It's in a town called Riverside, about 60 miles from Briarfield. They're facing a complex issue involving their water district and suspected embezzlement. Would you be willing to take a look? Tell me more. Rebecca explained the situation. The water district had been consistently over budget for several years. An audit had revealed irregularities, but the district's financial records were so disorganized that it was hard to determine what had actually happened. They needed someone who could sort through the mess and identify any criminal activity. I'll do it, Beatrice said. Send me the materials. Over the next several weeks, Beatrice worked on the Riverside case. The financial records were indeed chaotic, but she had dealt with worse. She created spreadsheets, tracked payments, identified patterns. Slowly, a picture emerged. The water district manager had been systematically overbilling the district for various services. He had created fake invoices from non-existent companies, approved payments to himself, and pocketed the difference. Over 5 years, he had stolen nearly $500,000. Beatrice documented everything carefully. She traced bank accounts, identified false invoices, and showed how the money had flowed. Her report was 147 pages long and included detailed exhibits. The water district manager was arrested based on her findings. He initially claimed the charges were false, but when faced with Beatrice's meticulously documented evidence, he pleaded guilty. At his sentencing hearing, the judge commended Beatrice's work. Mrs. Crowley's investigation was exemplary. Her attention to detail and clear presentation of complex financial information was crucial to achieving justice in this case. Beatrice attended the hearing but left immediately afterward, avoiding the press. She had no interest in publicity. She just wanted to do good work and move on to the next case. That summer, Tom Garcia graduated from college. He had earned a degree in engineering with honors and had secured a job with a major technology company. Before he left Briarfield to start his career, he stopped by the bookshop one last time. "I'm going to miss this place," he said, looking around at the shelves that had been so familiar to him for years. You're always welcome back, Tom. This will always be your bookshop. Mrs. Crowley, I wanted to tell you something. When I was younger, I didn't think I had much of a future. My family didn't have money. College seemed impossible. But you encouraged me. You gave me books that opened my mind to possibilities. You treated me like I mattered. That changed everything. You did the work, Tom. You earned your success. But you gave me hope that success was possible. That matters. And watching what you did, standing up to that gambling company, using your knowledge to help people, that taught me something important. It taught me that we all have responsibilities to our communities, that we should use whatever skills we have to make things better. I'm going to remember that as I start my career. After Tom left, Beatrice sat quietly in her shop, thinking about their conversation. She had touched one young life in a meaningful way. How many other lives had she touched without knowing it? The customers who found solace in books she recommended? The students who participated in her civic education program? The towns she had helped protect from corruption? The impact of a life couldn't be measured in headlines or awards. It was measured in these small moments, these quiet connections, these ripples spreading outward in ways impossible to fully track. In the fall of her 70th year, Beatrice received an unexpected honor. The State Bar Association wanted to give her their Public Service Award for her work over the past 2 years. Initially, she wanted to decline. She didn't do this work for recognition. But Rebecca Chen convinced her to accept. "It's not about you," Rebecca said bluntly. "It's about showing young attorneys that this kind of work matters. That fighting corruption and serving communities is valuable. Your acceptance of this award validates the work and encourages others to do it." So Beatrice agreed. The award ceremony was held at the state capitol. The room was filled with attorneys, judges, and public officials. Beatrice felt out of place in her simple dress among all the formal suits and gowns. But when she was called to the stage to accept her award, she looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces. Sarah Mitchell and Tom Brewster had driven up for the ceremony. Walter Simmons was there. Martha Henderson had come. Patricia Morrison was present in her military dress uniform. Even Tom Garcia, who had rearranged his work schedule, attended. The Bar Association president read a long list of Beatrice's accomplishments. He described cases she had worked on, money she had helped recover, corruption she had exposed. He praised her thoroughness, her integrity, and her commitment to justice. But perhaps most impressive, he concluded, is that Mrs. Crowley does all of this while running a small bookshop in Briarfield. She's not a full-time prosecutor or investigator. She's an ordinary citizen who uses extraordinary skills to serve her community and others. She represents the best of what our profession can be. People using their legal knowledge not for personal gain, but for the public good. Beatrice accepted the award and was asked to say a few words. She stood at the podium, looking out at the audience, and thought carefully about what to say. 20 years ago, I left the practice of law believing I had failed. I had been part of a system that allowed injustice, and I couldn't find a way to fix it from within. So I walked away. I built a new life in a small town, running a bookshop, trying to find peace. But what I learned is that you can't escape your gifts. You can't deny your training and experience. They're part of who you are. The question isn't whether to use them, but how. I found my answer by accident. My town faced a threat, and I had skills that could help address that threat. I could have stayed silent. I could have let others handle it. But I didn't. I stepped forward, used what I knew, and made a difference. That experience taught me that justice doesn't only happen in courtrooms. It happens in town council meetings and community gatherings. It happens when ordinary citizens use whatever knowledge they have to protect their neighbors and communities. It happens when we refuse to let wrongdoing go unchallenged, simply because challenging it is uncomfortable or risky. I don't have any grand wisdom to share. I can only tell you what I've learned through trial and error. Do the work. Tell the truth. Don't exaggerate or overreach, but don't minimize either. Present facts clearly and let them speak for themselves. And most importantly, remember why you're doing this work. Not for recognition or advancement, but because it's right. If my work has had any value, it's because I tried to stay focused on that principle. And I hope that others, especially younger attorneys just starting their careers, will do the same. Use your skills to serve. Use your knowledge to protect. Use your voice to speak truth. That's what the law is supposed to be for. That's how we make justice real. The audience applauded, and Beatrice stepped back from the podium. The ceremony continued with other awards and speeches, but Beatrice barely paid attention. She was thinking about her journey, from JAG officer to bookshop owner to public integrity consultant. Each phase had taught her something essential. After the ceremony, her friends gathered around to congratulate her. "That was a beautiful speech," Patricia said. "I'm proud of you, Beatrice. You found your way back." "I'm not sure I found my way back," Beatrice replied. "I think I found a new way forward." "However you want to describe it, you're making a real difference," Walter added, "and you're doing it without losing yourself. You're still the same person who runs a bookshop and recommends mystery novels. You've just added another dimension." "That's the key, isn't it?" Sarah Mitchell said. "You didn't have to choose between being a bookshop owner and being someone who fights corruption. You could be both." Martha laughed. "That's very Beatrice. She always makes things that seem complicated look simple." They went to dinner together afterward, celebrating at a nice restaurant near the Capitol. The conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from local gossip to national politics to favorite books. Beatrice felt surrounded by warmth and friendship. As they were finishing dessert, Tom Garcia said, "Mrs. Crowley, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret leaving the military, walking away from that career?" Beatrice thought about the question. "I did for a long time. I felt like I had wasted 25 years and given up because I couldn't handle one setback. But now I see it differently. Those 25 years gave me skills and knowledge that I'm still using. And leaving when I did gave me time to gain perspective and find a different way to apply those skills. So no, I don't regret it. Everything that happened, even the failure that drove me away, led me to where I needed to be." That's a generous interpretation. Maybe. But it's also true. Our failures don't define us unless we let them. They're just part of our story, part of what shapes us. The question is what we do with them. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Beatrice continued to think about what she had said. She believed it. Her failure in the Henshaw case had been real and painful, but it had also taught her humility, empathy, and the importance of fighting for justice even when the system seems stacked against you. Without that failure, she might have continued in the military, becoming increasingly comfortable with compromise and political reality. She might have lost the fire that made her stand up to Riverside Ventures, that made her take on difficult corruption cases, that made her speak truth regardless of consequences. Sometimes, she thought, our failures save us. The years continued to pass, marked by changing seasons and the gentle rhythm of small-town life. Beatrice turned 73, then 75. She showed no signs of slowing down. She still ran her bookshop 6 days a week, taking only Sundays off. She still took on consulting cases for the Attorney General's office, though she was more selective now, choosing projects that particularly interested her or cases where she felt she could make a unique contribution. She had become something of a legend in the state's legal community. Law students wrote papers about her work. She was invited to speak at conferences and law schools, though she turned down most invitations. She valued her privacy and her quiet life in Briarfield. But she did agree to teach an occasional seminar on public integrity investigations at the state university. She enjoyed working with students, sharing what she had learned over decades of experience. Many of these students stayed in touch with her after graduation, seeking advice as they began their careers. One of her former students, Elena Rodriguez, became a prosecutor specializing in public corruption cases. She credited Beatrice with inspiring her career choice. "You showed me that you don't have to compromise your values to be effective," Elena told her. "You can be honest and thorough and still win cases." That was revolutionary to me. Beatrice treasured these relationships with younger attorneys. Through them, her influence extended far beyond the cases she personally worked on. She was helping shape a generation of legal professionals who understood that the law was meant to serve justice, not just to facilitate transactions or protect power. In her 76th year, Beatrice was approached by a publishing company. They wanted her to write a memoir about her experiences. She declined. "My story isn't special," she told the editor. "I'm just someone who tried to use her skills responsibly." "That's exactly why it would be valuable," the editor argued. "Most legal memoirs are about famous cases or courtroom drama. Yours would be about the quieter ways justice is served, about ordinary citizens making a difference. That's a story people need to hear." Beatrice thought about it, but ultimately declined. She wasn't ready to put her whole life story into public view. The past was healed now, but it was still private. However, she did agree to write a practical guide for citizens who wanted to investigate potential corruption in their communities. She called it Ordinary Citizens, Extraordinary Impact, a guide to community advocacy and investigation. The book explained how to research public records, identify red flags in government or nonprofit operations, build evidence-based arguments, and present findings effectively. It was a small volume, only about 200 pages, but it was packed with practical advice drawn from her years of experience. She wrote in clear, accessible language, avoiding legal jargon. She included case studies from her work, anonymized to protect privacy, but illustrative of key principles. The book sold modestly, but found an enthusiastic audience among civic activists, good government groups, and concerned citizens. Beatrice received letters from people across the country who had used her methods to address problems in their communities. Several told her they had successfully exposed corruption or stopped questionable projects using techniques she described. This feedback was more satisfying than any award. She had created something that would continue to help people long after she was gone. Briarfield itself continued to thrive. The town had grown modestly, adding some new businesses and residents while maintaining its small-town character. David Kim continued as mayor, running the town with competence and integrity. Sarah Mitchell had been elected to the state legislature, where she championed transparency and ethics reforms. The bookshop remained popular, though the retail book business faced challenges from online retailers. Beatrice adapted by hosting more events: author readings, book clubs, children's story hours. The shop became even more of a community gathering place than it had been before. Walter Simmons continued to be a regular customer and friend, though he moved more slowly now and used his cane constantly. They still discussed history and current events, still debated interpretations and ideas. Their friendship had deepened over the years into something comfortable and sustaining. Martha Henderson had retired from teaching, but remained active in the community. She often helped out at the bookshop when Beatrice needed an extra pair of hands for events. Tom Garcia visited when his work schedule allowed, always stopping by the bookshop to say hello. He had married and had children now. On his visits, he brought his kids to meet Mrs. Crowley and showed them the bookshop that had meant so much to him. "This is where I learned to love reading," he told them. These connections, these relationships built over decades, gave Beatrice's life texture and meaning. The consulting work was important, but this community, these friendships, this daily interaction with neighbors and customers, this was what made life rich. On her 78th birthday, Beatrice found herself reflecting on her life with deep satisfaction. She had lived well. She had overcome failure and found redemption. She had used her gifts to help others. She had built a life of meaning and purpose. She wasn't finished yet. She still had work to do, books to sell, cases to investigate, students to mentor. But she felt at peace with her journey. Whatever time remained to her, she would use it well. That evening, as she locked up the bookshop and walked home through the familiar streets of Briarfield, she thought about the young woman she had been 50 years ago, just starting her legal career. That young woman had been idealistic and passionate, believing in justice and determined to serve. In some ways, she had never changed. She was still that person, still believed in those ideals. But she had learned that the path to justice wasn't always straight or clear. Sometimes you had to walk away to find your way back. Sometimes failure was a necessary teacher. Sometimes the most important work happened quietly, without fanfare or recognition. She had learned that being a hero didn't mean being perfect or never failing. It meant getting back up after failure. It meant using your gifts, whatever they were, to serve others. It meant staying true to your values, even when it was difficult or costly. She had been a JAG officer, a bookshop owner, a consultant, a teacher, a mentor, and a friend. All of these roles were part of who she was. None of them defined her completely. As she reached her house and climbed the steps to her porch, she felt grateful for the journey she had taken, for the life she had built, for the person she had become. She was Beatrice Crowley. She ran a bookshop in Briarfield. She helped communities fight corruption. She encouraged young people to dream big. She treasured her friends. She read voraciously. She lived simply. She made a difference. And that was enough. More than enough. 5 years later, at the age of 83, Beatrice made the difficult decision to close Crowley's books. Her arthritis made it hard to manage the shop, and she wanted to retire while she still had energy to enjoy it. She sold the inventory to other bookshops and donated the fixtures to charity. The town held a farewell celebration in the shop on its last day. Hundreds of people came through, sharing memories and thanking Beatrice for the years of service. Many bought one last book as a keepsake. "This place has been the heart of Briarfield," Walter said during a speech. "Beatrice Crowley gave us more than books. She gave us a gathering place, a source of wisdom, and a model of integrity. Briarfield is better because she chose to make her home here." Beatrice accepted the praise gracefully, but deflected attention whenever possible. She had never been comfortable with public accolades. After the shop closed, she settled into full retirement. She continued consulting on a few cases each year, but only ones that particularly interested her. She spent more time reading for pleasure, taking walks, traveling to visit friends in other cities, and enjoying the rhythms of a quieter life. The Attorney General's office still called occasionally with questions or requests for advice. Young attorneys still reached out for mentorship. But these demands on her time were manageable, allowing her to maintain the peace she valued. She also began working on a second book, this one a reflection on justice, failure, and redemption. She wrote slowly, taking her time to find the right words. It wasn't about cases or investigations. It was about what she had learned about being human, about living with integrity, about finding meaning in both success and failure. She didn't know if she would finish it or if anyone would read it, but the writing itself was valuable, helping her process her experiences and articulate lessons that might help others. One warm autumn afternoon, as she sat on her porch with a cup of tea and her manuscript, she received a call from Patricia Morrison. "Beatrice, I have news. Do you remember Captain Henshaw?" "Of course. He died in prison last week, heart attack. He served 15 years of his 30-year sentence." Beatrice was silent for a moment, processing this information. "How do you feel about that?" "I think justice was served, even if it took too long. The original victim was notified. She said she felt closure." "Good. That's what matters." After they hung up, Beatrice sat thinking about Henshaw and that long-ago case that had changed her life. His death didn't bring her satisfaction or relief. It simply felt like the end of a chapter that had been written long ago. She had let go of her anger and regret about that case years ago. She had learned that holding on to those emotions only harmed herself. Henshaw had eventually faced consequences. The victim had received some measure of justice. The system, for all its flaws, had ultimately worked. It wasn't perfect. Justice rarely was, but it was enough. As evening fell over Briarfield, Beatrice looked out at the town she had called home for 3 decades. The streetlights flickered on. Neighbors walked their dogs. A few remaining autumn leaves drifted from the trees. She had lived a good life here. She had found peace after turmoil. She had discovered that her skills could still be valuable, that her failures didn't define her, that her voice could make a difference. She had been given a second chance and she had used it well. What more could anyone ask? In her remaining years, she would live to 91. Beatrice continued her quiet life in Briarfield. She finished her second book, which was published to critical acclaim in academic circles. She continued to consult occasionally on corruption cases. She remained a beloved figure in the community, someone people turned to for advice and wisdom. When she eventually passed away, the town mourned. The funeral service was held at the largest church in Briarfield, and it was overflowing with people. Attorneys came from across the state. Former students flew in from distant cities. Townspeople filled every pew. The eulogies celebrated her integrity, her intelligence, her kindness, and her quiet courage. They talked about the corruption she had exposed, the communities she had protected, the students she had mentored, and the books she had sold. But what people remembered most was simpler than all of that. They remembered a woman who believed in doing the right thing, even when it was hard. A woman who used her knowledge to help others. A woman who never sought glory, but never shrank from duty. A woman who showed that ordinary citizens, using whatever gifts they had, could make a real difference in the world. Her tombstone was simple, listing only her name and dates. But those who knew her didn't need elaborate words carved in stone to remember her legacy. Beatrice Crowley had lived a life of silent justice, fighting wrongs without fanfare, serving communities without seeking praise, making the world a little better simply by being in it and using her gifts well. And in the end, isn't that what any of us can hope to achieve? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.